My name is Chad Etzel. I'm the host of the 8th Day Coaching Podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm also a trained and certified leadership coach, and my goal is to help you overcome stress and master your time, your money, and your God-inspired future. Now, typically this podcast is about leadership coaching, but I've been encouraged by a number of my friends, a number of the people that I've talked to apply these leadership coaching principles into our personal lives. And specifically with this new series, I'm calling it Catholic, Single, and Flourishing. The goal of the series is to help you as Catholic singles live your God-inspired calling, your vocation today, but also pave a path for the future. So feel free to check out this episode, check out the description in the show notes below, look for the links for the new podcasts and ways that you can connect with me, and also check out a free resource. It's an ebook that I wrote about helping Catholic singles break the cycle of pressure and inaction. With that, here we go with the episode. Have you ever had that experience of encountering an advice monster? This is somebody who is so certain that if you follow their advice, it will solve all your problems. Now, I think many of us have somebody maybe in mind, and for those of us who don't, maybe the monster's you. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that the monster isn't so much a person, but the monster is inside of us to a certain extent, and will rear its ugly head depending on the topic, the situation, or the people that we're around. And with this advice monster, it's a common experience that when somebody is giving us advice, particularly if the advice is unsolicited, that we get annoyed. Now, why is that? Why do we get annoyed by the advice monster? Well, oftentimes the advice isn't helpful. And in today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about why that might actually be the case and solutions on how to address that advice monster. Now, this goes for any area of our life, whether it's professional, if we're in management or we're in leadership, or just an individual contributor, or personally, in terms of discerning our vocation, in terms of dating and relationships and so on. We often seek out advice, but sometimes the advice just isn't all that helpful. Now, obviously, this series, as I've been talking about for the last several weeks, it's called Catholic, Single, and Flourishing. And it's for the perpetual single who the struggles are real. We're looking for our vocation. And we think that it's going to give us a sense of purpose, but really we're called to live our vocation today. That means a number of different things. One, which is what are we called to now? But also, how do we prepare for ourselves for our future big V vocation, our God-inspired call, whether it's marriage, priesthood, or religious life, and so on. Now, a lot of times there's just so much confusion out there. There's so many questions that we have, and a lot of times we need to go to our friends, and we go to our friends for advice. Or maybe we listen to good Catholic talks, or maybe we listen to good Catholic podcasts, and make sure to like and subscribe to this one as well, and leave us a 5-star review. But in the end, we might not get the results that we want. And I propose that the reason for this, of not getting the results we want, is because we are going for advice and we're not actually going for coaching, which is the solution for all this. We live in a very content and advice-centric culture. This is the information age, where we can look up any answer to any question. But the truth of the matter is, every person's struggle, every person's difficulty is unique. And the answers aren't always cookie cutter based on what's on that website or what's on that podcast. But, also I should say too, that advice isn't bad. Sometimes there's a lot of truth in this. Sometimes it gives us guidelines and sometimes it gives us shortcuts. But sometimes those shortcuts aren't actually shortcuts and they lead us to dead ends. That's why I'm talking about the difference between advice giving and coaching, and how coaching might be the thing that gives you the solution to what you're actually looking for. So I'm going to start by giving you 3 reasons why advice giving doesn't work. The first reason is that advice giving often focuses on solving the wrong problem. Think about that. Somebody's giving you advice. A lot of times they're telling you something that applies more to them than it does you. We all have our own biases, our own personal biases, and a lot of times this advice comes from a good place, but it comes from a lack of understanding of your situation. Again, somebody who maybe they're married and they're giving you advice about your single life, maybe your dating life, they're giving it from what they would do, their own perspective, their own frame of reference. And what that does is it limits them. It clouds them from being able to see what you're actually going through. they are focused on solving the wrong problem. So for instance, I know a lot of people who the dating advice that they get is that, oh, well, you're just too picky and you need to lower your standards. That may not actually be the right answer, because a lot of this is a symptom of not actually listening to people. When people give this type of advice, they're not listening to you. Maybe you have done a deep dive into your standards. A lot of times that advice is just too vague. You're too picky. You need to lower your standards. There's a difference there between non-negotiables and preferences, where non-negotiables has to do with somebody you're looking for who is maybe faithful to God or certainly faithful to you. And then in addition to somebody who handles conflict well, there's certain non-negotiables that we are always looking for in certain types of relationships versus more of the preferences. Maybe it's height, looks, particular interests that they have, and so on. Those things are a little bit negotiable. But a lot of times, even if it's well intended, this advice may not actually be addressing or focusing on the problem that you're going through, because it could not necessarily be your filter or how you're being too picky, but it could have to do with other things, such as how much you're meeting people, or how much you're getting out there or getting connected with others, or growing in your relationship skills, and so on and so forth. And I think what this does a lot of times with advice giving is it can dismiss somebody else's experience, your experience. Maybe our standards aren't the problem. There's other problems that are going on. And so that's why reason number one is that advice giving oftentimes focuses on solving the wrong problem. Number two, advice giving doesn't go deep enough. Advice giving doesn't go deep enough. That's also connected to number one, where they're not actually listening to our challenges or our problems. We oftentimes are overlooked when advice is given to us, because what is happening is the advice giver is entering into, say, chapter 8 of your story. And then they're saying, oh, well, this is how you resolve it. But they don't know what happened in the first 7 chapters to be able to understand what it is that you're going through. Some examples that I've encountered, and a lot of my single friends have encountered, is advice like, well, have you tried this dating app? Have you tried Catholic Match? And many of us have. And many of us even have hesitations towards getting started in that or continuing in online dating. And it's understandably so. Really, what needs to happen is getting to that underlying issue of what's holding us back. Maybe it's that number of people that we aren't meeting, and how can that be addressed through a dating app or any other medium. But also, again, going back to the first reason, really, is that it may not actually be addressing the underlying issue. For instance, I could have a confidence problem, or you could have a confidence issue where approaching somebody is just difficult. That's the issue. That's the deeper issue that we want to resolve. Or maybe it's just a human relationship skills. I need to work on my ability to have a conversation with somebody. That's actually getting to the deeper issue, rather than throwing a dating app at something that won't resolve that problem. Another piece of advice that I've often gotten or heard around is that you'll find somebody once you stop looking. All right. I don't know if you've heard that before, but I've received that many times. I've also had seasons where I've taken dating fasts and taken seasons off of dating. And I got to tell you, if I had a wife for every time that I took a season off of dating, then I would have more wives than would be possible of living a faithful Catholic life. So sorry, that was just a dumb joke. But I do know, I will say, and I think this, again, comes from a very good place. I do know of people who have stopped looking and they did find a spouse. But that's not actually a real strategy, and that's not a strategy that actually got them the spouse. I think what probably happened was they became detached from the anxiety or the pressure of trying to find the one, trying to find their spouse. And they became more peaceful and confident with who they are in the life that they were living as a single person, that actually made them more attractive. So the issue isn't that you are looking for somebody or you have a dating strategy, but the issue was how you felt about yourself in the goals that you're setting, in the anxiety or the peace in the opposite case of what you're feeling. So number 2 reason why advice doesn't work is that advice doesn't go deep enough. And then finally, number 3, advice giving takes ownership and accountability out of your hands. All right, what does that mean? Now, if I'm your manager at work and I tell you to execute a project in this way, this manner, and then that doesn't work or it takes a really long time, you have the escape of turning around and blaming me for the wasted time or how something didn't actually work. So what it does is it's basically an out. It's an escape for you to blame me for the difficulty that you experienced. Now, to some people, that's a benefit of advice giving, of getting advice from somebody. But on the flip side, what it really does, and this is even more important, is that it creates a dependence that you, if I'm your boss and I'm telling you what to do, it looks at me as the expert. Whereas maybe you're the expert. I'm just a manager. I'm just helping guide you. But what it does then is it creates that dependence where you're always coming to me for advice. So if something doesn't work, you have to come back to me. And that's not coaching. That's advice giving. The truth of the matter is that wherever you are, whatever it is that you're doing, you are the expert of your own life. Especially when it comes to dating, if you were to come to me and say, oh, what do I do next? And I say, oh, you should go to that Young Catholic Professionals Conference or something like that. And you said, well, I tried that last year. It didn't work for me. You can easily just dismiss my advice as opposed to me encouraging you to come up with some sort of strategy or some sort of plan that you are not only comfortable with, but also might be a little bit challenged. And then you start taking ownership. And that's really been a theme of this podcast. Everything that I've been doing here, especially looking back to the first episodes, going all the way back to that episode 1, the one area of life that elevates everything else. It's all about you owning your situation in life. Or episode 19, which was the first episode of this Catholic Single and Flourishing series, the determining factor in living your vocation today. All of these episodes are about you taking ownership over your situation, no matter what your circumstances are. The determining factor is you. So I just spoiled that episode, but I encourage you to check it out anyway. Anyway, what is the alternative to this? Of course, I've spoiled this all through the episode. The alternative to advice giving is coaching. And this is why coaching might just work for you. In fact, I'm confident that it works for you. Just thinking about coaching and how it differs from advice giving. Advice giving is very superficial. It's very direct and you should do this. Whereas coaching, a lot of it, 70% of it is listening. 20% of it's asking questions. And maybe 10% of it is like suggestions as opposed to recommendations. Recommendations might be too strong, so suggestions here. I feel like I'm in the Little Giants. Football's 80% mental and 40% physical. So hopefully I added those percentages right. But anyway, 90% of the audience probably did not get that reference, but that's all right. Anyway, continuing on, coaching. Whereas advice giving doesn't focus on the right problem, coaching does. Coaching helps you identify, and coaching also helps you address the right problems. So I'll give you this idea here. Coaching identifies what's really holding you back. What I do in coaching is I help you identify your goal. I help you gain clarity on what it is that you want. What is it that you want to run after? Because it's so important that we have the destination in mind. We have clarity of the destination in mind so that we can take steps to get there. Because if we don't have a destination and a clear destination, it's impossible for us to actually get to that destination. And then number 2 is I help you really get an understanding of the reality of where you are right now. I ask you to paint the picture of what's going on. What is the real challenge? What have you tried so far? What are the things that are holding you back? Coaches like me are trained to really listen at a deep level and help you gain that deeper understanding so that you can make decisions for yourself to take steps forward. Number 2, coaching goes a lot deeper than advice giving. So whereas advice giving is very superficial, coaching goes deeper than advice giving. What I want you to do right now, I just want to give you an example of coaching here. And I want you to pause whatever you're doing and really focus in on this activity that I'm doing. I know some of you are like me, like to listen and work out at the gym while listening to podcasts or drive, and that's totally fine. You can do your activity, but I want you to engage in this activity, really put your mental focus on me right now. And I want you to think about a real challenge that is going on for you right now, big or small, whether work related or personal life related. Maybe it's some sort of project. And I want you to really think about that challenge. What do you think the real challenge here is for you? Just think deeper of what's holding you back. Question number 2, what else is going on? I know this from my experience of coaching that even when I ask what is the challenge, what's the real challenge, there's many other challenges that are happening. So what else is going on? And then third question, what is the real challenge here for you? Obviously, I've asked that third question. It was the same one as the first one. But if you've really engaged in this exercise, you'll notice that the answer to question 1 was different the second time I asked it, in question 3. And in fact, it's probably even deeper. You're understanding your challenge in a deeper way. What that's doing is allowing you to go deeper into the challenge or the problem that you're facing and understand how you might be able to make steps towards addressing the real problem that's going on. Ultimately, it enables autonomy and ownership, which is that number 3. Coaching ultimately gives you ownership and autonomy over your situation. And that's because you are the expert of your own life. It's not me. It's not anybody else out there in the world except for maybe God. But you understand your situation more than any others do. Again, going back to what I was saying, the advice giver, or in this case, even the coach, is entering into chapter 8 of your story. But the coach is going to help you understand your story in its full perspective. So given your situation, maybe it's the problem that you're thinking about earlier or anything else, or as it relates to dating in the single life, given your situation, what are your options for taking steps forward? Maybe it's something that is actually actionable. Maybe it's something to pray about. Maybe it's something to address in terms of your limiting beliefs, which I've had several episodes and past podcasts about. And then, of course, one of the things that I always will ask in a coaching session is, which option would be most empowering? What is the way forward here? In coaching, we always end with an action item, especially an action item with particular deadline, because that allows us to see that you are moving forward, that your behavior, that your habits are changing. And as a result of coaching, what happens is that you end up setting goals and you end up setting a plan for yourself. You come up with these action items. It's not me telling you, hey, here's all the things that you have to do, but you come up with the action items and you take accountability for your plan. And this is exactly why when it comes to ownership, coaching is so helpful, because it empowers you to take ownership over your plan. It also gives you a deeper awareness of your situation, because you begin to see more possibilities of what is out there, what are the ways forward, what are the options for you. I remember one of the clients that I worked with recently, he was a business owner, and he started his business amidst a number of things that were happening in his life, but he was working full time. He and his wife had a baby. What happened with him was there was this huge transformation that he had through coaching. He grew in his resourcefulness, because a lot of times when he started coaching, he would come to me and answer a lot of my questions with, I don't know. But as the course of time went on, I just asked him the empowering questions that helped him to think on a deeper level. He developed the contacts that he already had. I didn't tell him, hey, here's people that you can connect with and go talk to. And he ended up with new business connections and new mentorship situations that he hadn't thought of before. His business was set up in a place where it wasn't at the beginning of our coaching session or coaching program. All right, just to recap here in a final few words, looking back at why advice doesn't work and coaching does. Number 1, first reason is advice giving often focuses on solving the wrong problem, whereas coaching helps you identify and address the right problem, the right obstacle that you're dealing with right now. Number 2, advice giving often doesn't go deep enough, whereas coaching helps you understand your situation at a deeper level. And then number 3, advice giving takes ownership and autonomy out of your hands, whereas coaching ultimately gives you autonomy and ownership over your life and over your situation. That being said, as we wrap up this episode, this is actually the last episode that I had planned for the Catholic Single and Flourishing series. Going back to this, the goal of this, I want to help you, especially those who are perpetually single, live your single vocation today, your God-inspired call, whatever that is today, but also prepare a path for your permanent vocation, marriage, priesthood, religious life, consecrated single life in the future. So helping you live your vocation today and prepare for your vocation in the future. This hasn't only been about dating advice. Of course, it has been, some of the episodes have really dug into dating and talking about the challenges that we face there. And that's because many of the perpetually single, as I call us, are facing that. That's where a lot of our attention is. But it isn't exclusively to that. So my invitation for you, as if you were to hire me as your coach, to think beyond just this is about dating. No, there's so many more things. As I mentioned before, I worked with a business owner. Most people come to me for personal finance help, but we can also talk about a variety of different things for you specifically as it relates to whatever's going on, the challenges, the problems, the struggles that you're having in your own life. I want to make a final note here. What I do on this podcast and on social media, it's not actually coaching. These are just starting points. These are just ideas and maybe a few tools that you can implement and try for yourself. But in order to really address the problem, the real deep down problem, I certainly recommend coaching, whether it's a one-on-one or group setting. But I also have a couple of other resources out there. So number one resource is an ebook that I wrote. And the ebook is called Catholic Single and Flourishing. It's called the subtitle is Overcoming the Cycle of Pressure and Inaction. Now, this ebook is about 20 pages. It's not 20 pages of content, but there's a number of exercises that you can go through, because what I realized is, as I prepared for this series of Catholic Single and Flourishing, is when I did my research groups, every time it came up in terms of attitude towards vocation, people mentioned the word pressure. People mentioned pressure, and how ultimately what they were saying, which they didn't necessarily realize, is how pressure kept them from taking steps forward and kept them from taking action. That's why I subtitled this Overcoming the Cycle of Pressure and Inaction. You can find this ebook on CatholicSinglesSolutions.com, or you can take a look at the show notes. You can access it there. I highly recommend taking a look at that. That's a free resource for you in exchange for your email. I won't spam you. You will be getting news and updates and tips on resources that are available for you. And then, of course, is coaching itself. Email me for a discovery call. There will be a link in the show notes for my email. And you can reach out to me to see if a discovery call is right for you. If you're serious about coaching at this time in taking and overcoming the cycle of pressure and inaction, maybe overcoming whatever is holding you back right now, identifying those problems, going deeper, coaching could be for you. So I highly recommend having a discovery call with me. And then final thing is just stay tuned to other resources that are coming out in the future. As I mentioned, this was the last episode that I had planned for Catholic Single and Flourishing, and this has grown in such popularity that I am likely going to do another season of this. We'll see how that goes. I'm going to be taking some time off here to kind of think about things and figure out direction, but it seems like it's really helping people because it's caught traction on social media. The download counts have gone way up from previous episodes that I've done. And I really want to encourage you to share these with your friends, even discuss these with your friends, and contribute to the discussion on social media. With that, as I wrap up, I do want to ask you, and I do want to hear from you, what other bad dating or singles advice have you gotten? Go ahead and leave a comment on social media, Instagram or Facebook. I will be interested in hearing what you have to say, and then just to see what sort of bad advice is out there and how we can address it through authentic coaching. That being said, just want to wrap up, say thank you so much for listening to the podcast. And as always, live inspired, live God inspired. Thank you for watching this episode of the 8th Day Coaching Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe on this YouTube channel, and check the description down below for any free offerings that I have, like my ebook on breaking the cycle of pressure and inaction for Catholic singles. Also, feel free to check out our other offerings at 8thdaycoaching.com.